Today we're going to be looking at the best video game narratives of all time. Storytelling has always been a huge part of human culture. It started with cave drawings dating back 30,000 years in France. But now we have video games, a relatively new and exciting way of creating engaging ideas and interesting characters. The quality of gaming narratives have shot right up over the past decade or two, and it begs the question, which of them are the best? Of course, this is just one perspective, so feel free to suggest any that are missing or if you agree or disagree with the list. Some of these games make for amazing one-off experiences, others containing moments so rich and memorable you have to revisit them time and time again. Even some games have multiple stories compressed into one and really adds to the idea of replayability. It seems right to start with some honourable mentions that didn't quite make the list but definitely deserve some praise. These have some great narratives and make for some unforgettable experiences in general. BIOSHOCK is a first-person shooter that came onto the scene in 2007. Set in 1960, it combines both dystopian and utopian themes and takes place in the underwater city of Rapture. The game was never really renowned for its gameplay, but it received critical acclaim for its morality-based storyline and unique environments. There have been several games as part of this franchise, including BIOSHOCK 2 and BIOSHOCK Infinite, but it's the original that really set the tone. BIOSHOCK is a true gaming great, and for anyone looking to pick this up for the first time, it has been remastered since its original release. Final Fantasy VII. There have been many entries to the Final Fantasy series, with even several candidates for this video. Always known for their immersive stories and prominent characters, these games were often trendsetters and raised the bar for what games could aspire to be. But arguably the most well known and fan favourite of the franchise is Final Fantasy VII, which debuted all the way back in 1997. There has since been a remake in 2020, which is likely a more accessible way for modern audiences to enjoy this classic. But as is often the case, it's hard to live up to what the original was able to do at the time.
Now, can I drive your car?
And I think you're gonna have to wait a little while for that.
Heavy Rain. Probably the most famous game to come out of the French gaming studio Quantic Dream. The company is known for their interactive storytelling and poignant narrative arcs. The game itself consists of 4 main characters who've become entwined in the mystery of the origami killer. Released in 2010, it went on to receive much critical and commercial success and sold over 5 million copies. Although it wasn't the first game to do so, it was particularly popular for its branching storylines depending on the choices the player made. Detroit Become Human. And another honourable mention goes to the more recent Quantic Dream production with the futuristic adventure game of Detroit Become Human. As the name suggests, it's set in Detroit, Michigan in the not too distant future. It follows the stories of 3 androids, Kara, Connor, and Marcus, who all have different roles in society but whose timelines inevitably converge. Just like Heavy Rain, this game features powerful emotional moments, branching storylines and decisions that you as the gamer will make that determines the outcome of the entire game. This is probably one of the most cinematic experiences I've ever witnessed from a video game, with truly incredible graphics.
James, honey, did something happen to you?
So that brings us on to the real top 10. And at number 10, Silent Hill 2. It's a 2001 survival horror game developed by Team Silent. Although technically a sequel, the game is very much standalone and shares little more than the location that was established in the previous game. The story centres on James Sunderland, a man who travels to the town of Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his recently deceased wife, asking him to meet her there. It starts with James staring at himself in the mirror, and as the game progresses, those introspective thoughts manifest themselves in all sorts of horrifying apparitions. The themes of guilt, anguish, and punishment are prevalent in the storyline, and these concepts are expressed visually in the form of enemies and monsters. At the time of release, it changed the way we think of the survival horror game genre. It contains eerie environments, twisted monsters, and genuinely unsettling psychological ideas. It's considered to be one of the best horror games ever made, and even one of the best video games of all time.
Cave Johnson here. This is a test chamber. 4 walls, ceiling and a floor. Good enough for science.
At number 9 is Portal 2. The legendary sequel to the original 2007 action puzzle game created by Valve. Similar to the original, players progress through levels by solving puzzles using the renowned portal gun. This allows players to create portal pairs and travel between them. This may sound like a relatively simple feat, but as anyone who has played the games will know, it's often easier said than done. The game makes the list for its originality and standout humour. The game received a huge amount of credit for its writing, acting, dark comedy and pacing. I have to say that the Portal franchise contains some of the funniest and most memorable moments I can remember from a video game. Anyone who hasn't yet played it, know that doing so is for science, and potentially cake.
You just keep on trying till you run out of cake.
Number 8. Life is Strange. It uses the format of episodes from a TV show to tell this moving and heartfelt story. The first season is based around the experiences of Maxine Caulfield, who possesses the unique ability to rewind time. She realises this after witnessing someone being shot and immediately is able to go back and change the individual events that led to this moment. The game throws you into the life of Max and all the standard teenage drama, but it very quickly evolves into something much more profound. Some of the game design is very clever, with general gameplay and objectives fitting the theme of a teenager's sketchbook or diary. If I had to be critical at all, the lip syncing looks noticeably more rudimentary than other games on the list, but the emotional engagement of the storyline completely shines through. At number 7 is the Witcher series. Although technically a trilogy, the standout entry is the third installment called Wild Hunt. This is probably one of the most rich and dense games ever made, with the comparisons made to Elder Scrolls Skyrim. It takes place in the open world created by the famous author, whose books have inspired many works including the recent Netflix TV series. The game is much more of a slow burner compared to the previous games, particularly at the start, but it escalates into a wild journey of discovery and many memorable experiences. You could easily spend over 100 hours playing this game, and even then it doesn't run out of steam. To maintain an engaging story and fun gameplay over such a length of time is very impressive and part of the reason why it ranks so highly. To appreciate the sheer size and scale of the game, you'd have to play it yourself, as no amount of footage can do it justice. As I mentioned before, the third game is the standout overall, but that's not to say that the previous games aren't worth playing either, especially in terms of the story. At number 6, Red Dead Redemption. This is a Western-style action-adventure game series by Rockstar Games, who are most well known for their GTA franchise. The most recent release is the 2018 Red Dead Redemption 2, which serves as a prequel to the 2010 original game. The story takes place at the end of the 19th century, where the peak of the Wild West is starting to diminish. Like the Witcher series, Red Dead Redemption is experienced in a massive open world, although a more gritty Western one rather than the fantasy one of The Witcher. The main protagonist in Red Dead Redemption 2 is Arthur Morgan, an outlaw and gang member. The story does also follow a fellow gang member called John Marston, who happens to be the protagonist of the original game. The sheer attention to detail in these games is second to none, with even dynamically growing facial hair and weather-induced phenomenon. But jokes aside, the 8-year development project is one of the most expensive video games ever made, and thankfully also one of the best. At number 5, God of War. Where do I start with this game? One of the most poignant, immersive and unforgettable games I've ever played. Based on the character Kratos from the original set of games that took place in the world of Greek mythology, this new game very much acts as a self-contained experience and reinvents the franchise in almost every way. For starters, it now takes place in the world of Norse mythology instead of Greek, and even the gameplay and narrative style completely differs from the previous set of games. The story takes you on a roller coaster of a journey, from Midgard all the way to the depths of Helheim. The environment and level design alone could warrant its own video, but where this really goes to another level is the character development. This can be seen most vividly through the central relationship of the father and son, Kratos and Atreus, also known as Boy. It starts with, let's just say, a cold and formal parental relationship, but subtly evolves into a moving and heartfelt bond. It's not often I insist friends and family playing a game, but this is one of them due to the perfect balance of an amazing storyline and immersive gameplay. All I can say is, bring on 2022. At number 4, the Mass Effect trilogy. It takes what we all love about futuristic sci-fi and builds a world that stimulates your imagination and gives you an overall experience that you'll never forget. It takes place in the distant future where a technology called mass relays were discovered, which allows for faster than light travel. This propelled the human race forward exponentially, and many other alien races were discovered in the process. The centre of political power and influence in the galaxy is the Citadel, where the governing council reside. The story of the trilogy centres around Commander Shepard, which you as the player can decide whether they are male or female. Over the course of the games, you are given a variety of missions and objectives by the council, which takes you to all 4 corners of the galaxy. The main narrative involves investigating in some way the events that led to the most advanced and dominant species in the galaxy being wiped out thousands of years before. Over the course of the 3 games, you encounter menacing foes, you make lasting friendships and even romantic partners. This all culminates in one of the most epic and adrenaline-inducing final chapters to any video game franchise. The trilogy is now best experienced in the Legendary Edition, which released in 2020, which compiles and remasters the series in the best possible way. At number 3, The Walking Dead. Essentially the archetype for story-driven games and popularised an entire genre. It was the catalyst for all of the subsequent releases that developer Telltale Games created. Most of their productions use an episodic narrative format which is broken down into seasons. This story though takes place in the same fictional world as the original comic, which many will know through the adapted AMC TV series. These events similarly occur after the onset of a zombie apocalypse, but most of the characters are separate from the TV series. The game forces the player to interact with the environment and people around you and often make difficult decisions in order to survive. Stylistically, it opts for a more comic-based aesthetic rather than the hyper-realistic look seen in the TV series. Gameplay-wise, there are no real technical or mechanical requirements, as it focuses almost entirely on story and character development. For many people, when they think of a game that gave them a true emotional experience and even made them cry, this is the game they think of.
I don't know. Can you help me find it?
Number 2. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, or often referred to as KOTOR. It's an RPG game that's essentially the precursor to Mass Effect and many BioWare productions since. It's set in the same universe as the Star Wars movies, but takes place thousands of years before the Galactic Empire. The backstory to this game is so immense, it would take multiple books just to flesh it all out. But to summarise, a war known as the Mandalorian Wars took place before the main events of the game. It left many people and alien races divided, with some deciding to stand and fight while others, including the Jedi Council, taking a passive but peaceful approach. But many members of the Jedi Order were conflicted, and some opted to defy the Council and join the Republic war effort and fight against the relentless Mandalorians. 2 notable individuals were Jedi Revan and his apprentice Malak. Through Revan's amazing affinity with the Force and his tactical ingenuity, he was able to almost single-handedly win the war. But their relationship with the Jedi was tarnished, and Revan and Malak disappeared. Soon after, for no apparent reason, the 2 of them returned with evil intentions and a Sith armada which soon launched an invasion on the Republic itself. After the Sith army grew beyond anyone's worst dreams, Revan was eventually betrayed by his apprentice and wiped out by his own ships, with Malak now ruling the Sith. The game itself begins with you, a player-defined character who works on one of the Republic ships. The reason why this game stands out to me so much is because of two aspects. Firstly, it completely reinvents the Star Wars narrative. So much so, I personally think of KOTOR when I think of Star Wars. The strength of characters, depth of narrative, and even the setting, in my opinion, overshadows the movies in almost every way. Within 20 minutes of gameplay, you are introduced to a planet called Taris, which has more socio-economic and political depth than anything from the films. The city comprises of an upper city, where the middle to upper class live, the lower city, which is largely dominated by uncontrollable gangs, and the undercity, where the poorest try to survive. This is made even more difficult due to a deadly and mutating disease. Now I come to the main reason why this game is so special. It arguably has the best individual moment to any video game in history. Those who have played it will know exactly what I'm talking about, but those who haven't, it's available on many platforms, although with the recent announcement of a complete remake, it is understandable if you want to wait until that's released. So that leaves us with only the top spot. And at number 1, The Last of Us. The characters, setting, and story development over the 2-game journey make for a truly awe-inspiring experience. The original came out in 2013 and shows things from the perspective of Joel, a man who lived through the traumatic events which led to one of the most decrepit and brutal post-apocalyptic worlds ever portrayed in a video game. The sequel shows things from the view of Ellie, a companion Joel befriended in the first game. The first 20 minutes of the original entry genuinely blew me away, and I even had to pause for a few minutes just to soak it all in. Over the course of the first game, let alone both, it genuinely feels like an emotional and atmospheric experience unlike anything I've ever experienced from a game. The attention to detail, not just from a game design perspective, but even in terms of the acting, never ceases to amaze. It was the first game I ever even considered acting as a notable aspect of it, and also the first game I ever played on PS4. The only situation where I would refrain from recommending anyone to play it is if you're genuinely squeamish or can't handle horror at all. Anyone else? There's no excuse. Well, apart from the clickers. Watch out for those.